Hi everyone, this is Deb Chamberlin with The Awakened Artist and another soul tuning session with my friend Sofia Livingstone, who's in Italy. It's the end of a day, a long day that she's been working on her land today. So I just want to welcome you, Sofia.
Thank you.
How are you feeling today?
Yeah,
Good.
not too bad. Quite a lot going on the land, as you know.
Yeah, I know. So after our last video that we did together on the topic of fear, Sofia noticed that some issues of shame were coming up about how she was during our conversation on the video. And so we thought it would be a really great topic to address self-abandonment in this next video. So what do we mean by self-abandonment? It's about our inability to be vulnerable. To me, it's when my mind and my body split and I can no longer feel my feelings. It doesn't feel safe to feel my feelings. A lot of times I'll shut down. I'll go into fear, shame, overwhelm. I just get really triggered, and a lot of times I'll just go into people pleasing because it just doesn't feel safe for me to be myself and to speak up and say what I'm feeling, what I'm needing, what I'm thinking. I'm afraid other people will judge me or get enraged, hostile, or abandon me. So I'll abandon myself and people please and walk on eggshells. That's one of the ways that I self-abandon, which I think a lot of people can relate to. And then I've seen it show up in myself, like I'll just abandon my whole momentum creatively, artistically. I'll not even be in the mood to write songs. I won't be in the mood to self-promote my creativity, my work. I see it with other people in the same way, similar ways. It could show up like a writer's block where I have nothing to say, or I have so much to say that I can't even access it. So I'll just not even try. What are some other ways? Stage fright. Oh my gosh. Is a classic way that we abandon ourselves. We get overwhelmed with all these other feelings except our own feelings, our own truth. And we lock up like a deer in the headlight. Anxiety kicks in. So those are some, just, the tip of the iceberg ways that people can self-abandon. So Sofia, I'd like to just toss this over to you because you are so deep into this conversation with your own work. So what would you say self-abandon is for you, self-abandonment?
Well, I'd just say that I think that was a great summary of a lot of my stuff as well. I mean, my history is very much about codependency. I don't know if it's a word that everybody knows about, but codependency really means that we're not with ourselves, we're with the other. Whatever the other might be, it might actually be substance abuse with alcohol and drugs, but very often with women, it's the man. My bottle was definitely my man, or any man, any man, for the similar reasons that you're saying about abandonment or wanting to be validated. I still have codependent issues. I don't pretend otherwise, but I live in a very different way now. I don't have to please anybody, and I don't have anybody that I really can reject me anymore. I've lost so many people. So no, but then that's part of the growth process. But I would say that I can self-abandon then from the other side, from too much isolation. Mm-hmm. Because in my fear of other people, because being with other people, I lose myself in the same ways that you're talking about. I will people please. I will look at their nonverbals, the things they say, and I will immediately see it as proof that I'm not worthy. And in fact, it happened on that last call. It wasn't actually something you did on the last call. I was saying something about my book, and some unworthiness came in about shame, mixture of things about I shouldn't share it now, and who wants to know about it anyway, and then it shut off her ability to speak. And so I think when you're talking about stage fright and all of these other things, I think we are habituated to not be allowed to say what our feelings are, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were allowed to go on stage and speak and actually say, I'm trembling. I trained with a woman called Shamali from Awakening Women, and she would always say, when you're really frightened and shaking, just say it. And so when I said it to you last week, it took away all of the paralysis and the panic. And I didn't immediately remember what I was going to say, but it's like it took away all of the awful blockage, really, because it gave me permission. And I think that's what we have. We have to find out what our control system is and what our permissions is. Do I have permission to say to you that when I get really shamed in our conversation now, that I don't want to look at you? It's nothing to do with you, but when I'm in shame, it's like the way that I actually avoid self-abandonment is to start to come more in relationship with myself and with my body. So if I'm with you and I'm too invested in you, then that's my codependency. I must get it right because I'm on a YouTube with Debs.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, if I say, no, I'm not going to self-abandon, but I also stay in connection with you, and I say, I don't want to self-abandon, but I'm actually feeling rather self-conscious and I'm aware that some shame has kicked in. I just need to take a breath. So for me, my newest thing that's happening is I'm doing a lot of very deep breath work, and it's changing my life radically. So, yeah, I mean, I'll stop there because I could go on forever. I need you to ask me another question to put me in containment, because that's always my thing. How do I contain to feel safe?
Well, I'd like to hear about the breath work in a minute. Sorry, my dog has decided she wants to be a part of this. So I liked what we were talking about before, to explain to people more of what does it mean when we self-abandon, like our feelings, our emotions that we don't feel safe to feel, we exile them. We send them away. We shut down, we numb down, we stop feeling our own feelings, our own needs.
Yeah.
I think that's really important to understand, that is what the key aspect of self-abandonment is. Do you want to share more about how that shows up in you?
Yeah, well, I've been on a long journey in that I can say categorically I was forbidden to have any emotions that didn't. I grew up in what they call an enmeshed family system. Mm-hmm. And there was fusion, and I was only allowed to express the emotions that pleased. If you're around narcissism, then you can't go against the system. It's too risky as a child. So as Gabor Mate says, I recommend anybody looking up some of his YouTubes, Dr. Gabor Mate, I think it might be pronounced. And he says that what happens for everybody, and especially where there's trauma, which is in a great deal of cases, is that a child, a baby, especially when very young, but right the way through, we need attachment. Attachment is the safety of the comfort of the nourishment. We're going to get the food, but the love. And we will give up our authenticity. We will give up our feelings. Mm-hmm. Like if I had anger in my own family system, I would have been destroyed. My brother was destroyed. He had anger. I watched that happen, and I chose to conform. So it was a safety mechanism that worked then. But conforming and being a people pleaser, which is something that most of us know about, depending on the level of severity, means that we can become completely unaware, as I was, of any rebel. I never rebelled as a teenager. I didn't have any anger until I was 43. I didn't even know it existed. And when I first got in touch with anger within workshops, my legs would collapse because it's forbidden.
Yeah.
It's forbidden in the system, in my belief system, it's forbidden. And the risks are severe. The risks are you will be cut off and have no love. And so it goes on. We all have our different belief systems. There's no permission. So that's how it was for me.
Yeah. So part of the healing process of becoming aware of our wholeness again is to reclaim those parts that we have exiled, to allow ourselves to drop down in our bodies. So we bring our awareness back into instead of sending our awareness away and numbing out, we bring our awareness back into our bodies, feel our feelings, and allow ourselves to be vulnerable, unguarded, and make sure we're safe in the process of doing that, of course. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, I think the challenge is if you come back to the body as the container or the body as the temple. In my case, for example, there was no safety to come back to the body. If there's trauma, as there was for myself, then coming back to the body is a very unsafe experience.
Mm.
And so I used a lot of what we'd call counterfeit spirituality. So anything from New Age to, internet distractions, food, whatever, anything, people. Being super busy, anything to avoid actually being with myself. And breath was not possible for me to go into. I had to do active meditations. If I did meditations, I had to do mantra, or I had to go walking with the dogs, because to sit in silence was to activate the trauma.
Yeah. So it's still the same process. It's just underneath. It's just how you go about that process. Each person has their own journey with it. For you, you had to do it a certain way to make it safe for you to be in your body.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's a really, really key point to accentuate. I think when you're struggling with this, there's a very good likelihood that you're suppressing trauma. Do you think?
Yes. Well, Gabor Mate, I had ME, and no one ever told me anything about trauma. In all the years of training I did, years and years of different psychological and spiritual trainings, no one mentioned trauma back then. Now, thankfully, he's saying there isn't anyone he knows with chronic fatigue who doesn't have trauma. And that was never said in those years. And what he's saying is that everyone who has addiction has given up their authenticity. In other words, they've given up their ability to have the vulnerability and the emotions they need to have in that spontaneity in order to keep as safe as they can with alcoholic parents or abusive parents or whatever. And there's a hole inside that needs filling. There's a disconnect from the body and a disconnect from the sacred. And in my case, as a perfectionist, I had no connection to creativity because I just had to walk on eggshells and be totally perfect. That's extreme. But many, many people have given up so much of themselves. And there's loads of places where they're self-abandoning by going for the quick fix, sabotaging by doing things that really aren't self-serving, and not really realizing what's going on, what's the trigger, what are the patterns that are actually very old and actually taking you right back to where you weren't allowed to be that free self.
Even the pursuit of success, money, fame is a way to try and fill that void, to fill that hole. But the point that we're trying to make is nothing fills that when you're self-abandoning. The only thing that is going to work is to awaken to your wholeness and to do the work to bring back and reconnect with the things that we've abandoned in ourselves, right? And cut off, sent away.
And I think that leads to a question that you and I were talking about the other day, is what do we do to avoid?
Right. And one of the things that I shared with you was this poem by Jeff Foster, which I'll post with the post of this video, which is, he shares about the really difficult feelings that we all have: shame, fear, intense feelings, anxiety, how we really don't want to, who wants to experience those? Nobody, right? So we push them away. But until he was able to really be with them, he couldn't be in his power. He couldn't listen to himself. He couldn't. And so I think for creative people, artists especially, to be in our full creative power, we have to go into those places. We have to be present. We have to be present with ourselves, our authentic selves. And we have to be willing to be vulnerable and to feel like we can't do it, and to walk through that portal into, so what's on the other side of I can't do this, and connect. So what are some of the ways that have worked for you to self-connect and self-presence?
Well, I think we talked about it, didn't we, in the last YouTube, that I realized that writing that poem that day in the kitchen was a container, and it was something that belonged to me.
Yeah.
And I was able to look at it and actually see the map and the glue of the whole of my life, and still can do that now. And I believe it will be still as valid, like you said about your songs, till I die. But I think I was thinking about Jeff Foster's poem. I believe, he's pretty enlightened guy, and it's when I look at each verse that he said, I've had 20 years of life experience and I'm still working on shame, and it continues to be a challenge, and no doubt will be for the rest of my life. But I think there are some people who can be in their wholeness and have integrated power and vulnerability together. And then they could do creative artwork, singing, whatever, from that place. But an awful lot of artists come from a place of being out of balance and using art as the way that they hold things together. They're in desperation, they write some songs, and in their rest of their life, they don't have it together in relationships or finance or other areas. And I guess what you're trying to do with, if I get it right, with Artist Way, is to help people to see if you can come into more wholeness in order to fully connect with yourself and come not always from a place of suffering with art. Is that right?
To awaken to our whole selves, instead of seeing ourselves as shattered, fractured, split, and self-abandoning, because the self-expression that comes through someone who, not to say we're not going to create art that expresses that, how we fracture ourselves and self-abandon. I think that's really a beautiful thing to share. It's part of the human experience. But coming from a place of wholeness is where you can actually elevate people from that stuck place who are witnessing the art into a higher vibrational frequency in themselves. You're kind of like hitting a higher frequency inside of them, awakening it from sleep. And so that's what I'm seeking to do with this work. Be the change you wish to see in the world, heal the healer. So not to say you can't create art until you have it all together. We'll never create art.
That's an overwhelm in myself. I mean, I was just looking at a woman called Tanya, who does sisterhood circles, and she's got a list of 5 different types of overwhelm that most women suffer from. And so the overwhelm for me of having to get my shit of self-abandonment together means that I can do every strategy and then overwhelm myself in the process of making sure I eat the right food, or I do breathing techniques, or and that in itself is an overwhelm. It's
about the illusion of perfection. There is no perfection. We're as awake as we are in this moment, and then the next moment maybe we'll be more awake. But for me, the intention is to keep expanding our and raising the frequency and the level of consciousness instead of self-abandoning and going to sleep on myself and the world. So many people have gone to sleep on the world in that either or context. It's like, well, I can't fix anything out there, so I'm just going to take care of myself. And that's going to sleep on the world. We're all connected. We're all part of the collective. So to me, it's about connecting to that aspect of myself. So to sort of wrap up this conversation, what are some of the other ways that you have found? When you say you do breath work, can you, in a nutshell, explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've really had trouble with breath work because I think that's very much part of a trauma. We hold it, all up here. And, the feelings, therefore, don't have to be felt because they are restricted by the tightness of short breathing. So there's a double bind in the sense that, that as you start breathing deeply, the feelings will come up. So I've actually joined the Alchemy of Breath, and you can on Sundays go for a free session with this amazing man twice a day, and I recommend it to anybody. I can put the link in.
That would be great in the comments. That would be great.
Life changing, it really is, because you're in a very safe container, and I think that's the thing. If feelings are going to come up, it's like whether you're in the 12 step, you need either to have the money to go and see a counselor or to be in some kind of group to be able. So that's would be what I would say, is that when there is intense deep feelings, to find some safe container, because with trauma you shouldn't work on your own. If it's only a minor thing, you can do your journaling and whatever ways you find.
Meditation, right?
Yeah, for me, walking, I mean, couldn't do it when I couldn't walk with my illness, but walking is very good to, be in my body. My animals are very important to me. Writing is really saving me. I've got this major problem on the land. Massive stress with a landslide, and so I was actually up, which I don't normally do in the middle of the night, but I decided to write a full chapter on my memoir, and it got me through the night, and then I got something to show for it. And rather than beat myself up that I didn't sleep and I did fuck all, excuse the language, that's what happens. I start beating myself up. It's like, so I'm trying to discipline myself to not overdo, but just do just do enough and watch myself when I start beating myself up. And if things get really bad, then I'll do the breathing. And the breathing that is a man called Wim Hof. It's he's known as the Iceman, and it's 30 breaths in and you hold it. And I could put the link. I think that's best.
Do that. Yeah.
And it's really, it brings it not only safeguards when you have really intense feelings, but it also brings in the bliss. And I've been getting connection with my vanishing twin, with a sense of wholeness with my body, with the divine. So, you know, you get both at least. So what I find with, just to finish with one sentence, is that I have never had something that I can hold all my feelings and stay grounded with it, because I have pretty intense stuff in my life that I have to deal with. Which isn't important to say here. And I've never had a medium. Writing fine, but not for the kind of stuff I'm actually dealing with, which is prenatal trauma. Right. And breathing is allowing me to hold all of it. Right. And this container of this group that anyone is welcome, he's breathing this movement in the world. And it really is a movement of love. And it's a tremendous support. So if anybody wants to investigate the breath work, I really couldn't recommend it more highly. I'm excited. I'm doing an 8-month training course with them. Wow. Because I know it's a soul thing now to take me more deeply into my body.
Great. I want to hear about it as you go through. I'm sure I will. So just to complete this whole conversation, the things that we're talking about are self-abandoning. Everyone does it at some point, right? And that's when we don't feel safe or able to contain our feelings, the awareness of our feelings, the presence of our feelings in our bodies, in our awareness, in our minds and bodies at the same time. So we kind of split aspects of ourselves off, and we become disempowered and we shut down. We can become ill on all kinds of levels from that over time. And so what we're talking about are ways to, number one, notice when you have self-abandoned. What does that feel like for you? Each individual person is different. And number two, how to begin to come back into presence. Presencing what you're feeling, what's going on. So that you can begin to come into your power again and your functionality as a human. And this is about the feelings, the emotions, and the body and the mind all together as one whole self.
Something's coming because I'm worried. I'm seeing my battery go down to 3%.
Okay.
YouTube to suddenly go and abandon us. I just wonder, as you're saying that, I'm wondering if our next YouTube could be on resources, inner and outer resources. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because that is, how do we fill ourselves up with the things that work for us? Because what works for you doesn't necessarily work for me as a resource.
Exactly.
And if we've been codependent with outer resources, maybe we need to really look at what are the inner resources that we can feel safe by breathing, that nobody else can. Right.
Because you can't just stop being codependent without a new way of working in the world.
You know, it's other, and I had that happen to me, and people, you know, took away all the things because it's like, well, you should do it differently, and then you're left with nothing, and that's dangerous.
Right. Okay, that's awesome. I like that idea. Okay, well, I hope that this has been helpful to those of you watching, and thank you again, Sofia. I love talking with you. Always learn things, and we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.